Hi, I'm your Scream Queen Poppy and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a film called Speak No Evil, which came out in 2024. It's 110 minutes long and it's rated a 15. Some trigger warnings for this film include violence, threats and mentions of CA. So just be cautious when you're watching this one. A quick summary for the film. When an American family is invited to spend a weekend at an idyllic country estate of a charming British family that they befriended on vacation, what begins as a dream holiday soon warps into a snarled psychological nightmare. This film was written and directed by James Watkins. It's based on a Danish film, also called Speak No Evil, which came out in 2022, which was done by Christian Taftrup and Mads Taftrup. Some notable cast mentions for this film obviously include James McAvoy from Split 2016, as well as X-Men. We also have Mackenzie Davis from Martian 2015, and Scoot McNairy from A Quiet Place Part 2 from 2022. At the time of filming this, it has a box office of $75.8 million, so it's a very well-watched film. Let's get into the plot. We open with an American couple, Ben and Louise, who are on holiday with their daughter Agnes in Italy. There they meet a British couple called Paddy and Kira, who are there with their son Ant. When Ben and Louise return to London, there are odds over his employment as well as her infidelity. They then receive a letter from Paddy and Kira inviting them to stay at their remote farmhouse in Devon for the weekend to get away. The family decides to go because they think a change in scenery will be good for all of them, including Agnes, who has anxiety and she's very overly attached to her stuffed rabbit, Hoppy. When they arrive at the farmhouse, they're really warmly welcomed and they settle in, but the more time they spend there, the more unnerved they become due to a series of really strange incidents. Their hosts are passive-aggressive and they cross multiple boundaries with the other family. They guilt-trip Louise, who's a vegetarian, into eating meat by telling her they'd specifically slaughtered this animal just for them. They scold Agnes in front of her own parents and are then also very aggressive to their own son Ant. It's also worth noting that their son Ant can't speak. His parents explain this is due to him being born with a condition that left him with a very small tongue and the inability to verbally communicate. One evening, the adults all go out for dinner, leaving Agnes and Ant in the care of a stranger. This really unnerves her parents, but they begrudgingly agree as the other family says that he's babysat for them multiple times without a problem. So the kids and the babysitter decide to play a game. They pick hide and seek. And while they're playing, Ant shows Agnes a collection of watches in his parents' bedroom that Paddy owns. One of them has a message written in Danish, but Agnes cannot read it. As much as Ant is trying to communicate with her, she can't understand what it is he's trying to tell her. Dinner with the adults. Paddy lays into Louise about her vegetarianism, has a whole debate with her about it, trying to guilt her about it. And then him and Kira simulate a sexual act at the dinner table, which leaves not only Ben and Louise uncomfortable, but the audience uncomfortable too. I've got to admit, this part of the film was a bit difficult to watch. Back at the farmhouse that night, Louise goes to find Agnes to check on her, make sure she's asleep, but she isn't in her bed. Louise is then horrified to find Agnes sharing a bed with a drunken Paddy and Kira who are half naked. So she pulls Agnes out of bed and tells Ben that they have to leave and they have to leave now. The family get in the car and leave, but Agnes begins to have a panic attack when she realises she's left her rabbit Hoppy back at the farmhouse. She literally will not let them leave without this rabbit. They go back to retrieve the toy and come across Paddy and Kira, who are very upset that they've left without saying goodbye. They apologise to Ben and Louise for their behaviour, and Kira states that the reason she'd been so welcoming and warm to Agnes was because she had lost a little girl herself. She claims this is why she's being so protective, and they also subtly accuse Ben and Louise of judging them. So they decide to stay for the remainder of the weekend to keep the peace. But the strange behaviour continues and it continues to unsettle them all even more. At one point they're all outside and the kids want to show the parents this dance that they've come up with together. It's really cute. But Paddy and Kira degrade Ant for not being able to keep up with Agnes and for getting some of the dance moves wrong. Paddy is drunk and infuriated, and he keeps shouting and forcing them to go again and again, and he scares the kids and throws a mug at Ant, which causes Ben and Louise to raise concerns, rightfully so. Kira puts Paddy to bed so he can sleep off his stupor and tells the couple they can't leave yet because they've had something to drink, so they need to stay and have a coffee and sober up. While this is happening, Ant steals a pair of keys from the sleeping Paddy and takes Agnes into one of the barns. He unlocks the barn to reveal a collection of luggage and possessions belonging to numerous families. It's a lot of stuff. He then shows her a photo album which reveals that Paddy and Kira aren't Ant's parents. They are serial killers who lure families to come to their farmhouse so that they can rob and kill the parents and steal the children. Once they've stolen the children, he also manages to explain that they cut the children's tongues out to stop them from snitching. This is also so they have no chance of escape and they can assist in luring the next family in, which is exactly what is being done now to Ben, Louise and Agnes. Agnes puts all these pieces together. She sees the photo of Ant with his real parents and she begins to panic. She knows that her family is next. So she returns to the group in hysterics. She tells her mum that she's started her time of the month to get her mum alone. She gets both of the parents in the bathroom and explains the situation fully to them. They need to leave, but they also need to not arouse suspicion. So they have to act normal and they can't just up and leave. They've got to figure out a plan to get out. So they come up with a story that she started her, and that they're going to have to take her home. But Paddy and Kira catch on very quickly that something's awry and they slash Ben's tyres to stop them from making a quick getaway. Paddy acts like nothing's wrong and helps Ben in changing the tyres because he's a good guy. But then they also realise that Hoppy's gone missing again. He's stuck on a gutter above them and Ben has to climb this very precarious ladder to try and retrieve Hoppy. And as this is all happening, they're trying to delay them from escaping. They're also mocking them the whole time as well. It's a really unnerving scene. And as the family finally get into the car and begin driving away, in his rearview mirror, Ben sees Paddy push Ant into the pond on the estate. Now Ben knows Ant can't swim and guilt consumes him, so as they reach the gate to escape, which is being closed right before them, he stops the car and gets out, jumping in the pond to save Ant's life. As Ben is pulling Ant out the water, he realises that Paddy has a gun to his head and Kira has a gun to Louise and Agnes. The family are tied up and the parents are forced to bank transfer all of their money over to Paddy and Kira, and they're told that the parents are going to be killed and they begin preparing Agnes to remove her tongue. A struggle ensues amongst the parents and Paddy is injured. Ben, Louise and the kids manage to flee back inside the farmhouse, while Paddy and Kira are joined by their friend Mike and they band together to hunt down the family. Louise manages to kill Mike and save Ben, and then the four of them flee to the roof. Meanwhile, Kira sees what they're doing and she attacks them. Another struggle ensues and Kira is pushed off the roof, falling down to her death. As they then try and escape, Paddy appears and he manages to grab a hold of Agnes. He has her at gunpoint when he sees Kira's body and realises she's dead and he's mourning for her. But what he doesn't see is that Agnes has managed to steal a syringe from the shed that they were tied up in, and she injects Paddy with a syringe of oxygen. This incapacitates him on the floor and the group decide to leave. But as they do, Ant approaches his father with just the most hate and rage any child could have. Paddy acknowledges his fate. He looks up at Ant and says, "There's my boy," and that does it for Ant. Ant picks up a brick and beats Paddy to death. He breaks down and the family all escape together. As they're leaving the farmhouse, the kids are sat in the back and Agnes hands Ant her little rabbit, little Hoppy, and he sits silently crying in the back, clutching that toy. And that's where the film ends. So let's discuss some of the themes for this film. This is a psychological thriller / horror. It's definitely got elements of both. And I think the psychological aspect is shown very obviously throughout all the mind games that they play with Ben and Louise, the passive aggressiveness, the guilt trips. it's really prevalent throughout the entirety of the film. It also has themes of CA and kidnapping, obviously after what we've already talked about. That's obviously not a very nice topic, but did engage to make a very engaging film. It also has themes of toxic masculinity as well as forced politeness and conflict avoidance, because Ben and Louise were trying their hardest to be good guests and trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, but at times you're watching it going, Ben, please just go, leave, she knows what's happening. That also kind of mirrors in their relationship between her texting other men and him not having a job. There's a harbored resentment towards each other, and this forced politeness and this forced facade of being a perfect family. Script-wise, I think it did a fantastic job of storytelling. It told the whole story of this film without having to go into too much depth. It did a really fantastic job. The script as well as the accents help to disarm you a bit throughout the film. Personally, I find accents disarm me when I'm watching a film. If you're watching a film and the majority are American or are British and you have someone with a fun little accent in there, they're the quirky character, aren't they? Or that's how it's kind of portrayed. And Paddy is so wild. He is such a complex man. He has a lot going on. And it makes each weird occurrence seem almost that much weirder. You can't tell if it's meant to be lighthearted or a joke, or you can't tell if you're meant to be taking it seriously. And the script builds this uncomfortable tension throughout. The further you get in the film is kind of the more tense you are watching, because you just want the best for the family and you can see it's all going awry. Plot-wise, I thought the plot was really interesting. The idea of them almost cuckooing their way into all of these children's lives, stealing these children from their family and turning them into their own little family, where she gets sick of the kids after a while, she wants a new one. The idea of making these childs fit into their weird little universe, it's unsettling to watch. And it's mentioned towards the end of the film that Paddy and Kira are trying to create Kira's dream family. So they keep trying to find children that'll fit into this dynamic. I think her losing a child probably was true, and she's trying to replace this child with other children, but none of them love her like her own kid does, and I wonder why. They were eventually hoping one of these children would fit and that they'd be able to stop doing it, but I almost think they were addicted to the feeling of the power they were having over these lives, the trap that their families were falling into. It seems more like a game to Paddy and Kira. It's a really scary concept, actually, if you think about it in detail, and the mind games that are prevalent throughout just make you question reality along with everyone else in this film. Acting wise, I think the acting was spot on, to be honest. The fear and anxiety from the guest family is evident, really evident throughout, and it builds with the film. And the absolute insanity being cultivated by Paddy and Kira is mind-boggling. It's palpable in the film. They're absolutely manipulative and aggressive, but while also being up in the clouds in their little fantasy land, and it conveys a real tone of desperation and madness. Cinematography-wise, it was a pretty beautiful film, actually. It had some really lovely scenic shots, and most horrors are really dark cinematography-wise, like dark visuals, dark audios. And there was a lot of that when the tones got darker in the film. You're kind of put at rest by some of the more comedic elements of the film. Like the whole simulated scene starts really uncomfortable. I really didn't enjoy watching that, but then it's turned into a big joke, which then disalarms you for whatever's going to happen next. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a comedic film, but there were lighthearted moments. There was a couple of bits I laughed at that probably weren't meant to be funny, but there's like one particular scene where Paddy takes Ben out hunting in the woods and they're just screaming into the countryside, and I think it's meant to be this big dramatic moment, but all I could do was laugh. I just think Paddy's absolutely off his rocker. But you're made to question the intent of the host family along with the guest family for the duration of the film. Is it an overreaction? Are they overreacting, or is it spot on? Are they just really freaky people? Gore-wise, it is a 15, so it's not going to be a really gory film. There were small moments of gore, or alluded to gore, like with the children's tongues, but it was definitely more of a psychological film than it was a gory film. Which isn't a good or a bad thing. I think when you have a lesser age rating, you've got to try and think of different ways to make it an engaging thriller or an engaging horror, and I think it still did a really good job of that. Talking about the tones of abuse, there are I was going to say undertones of abuse throughout, but no, they are overtones. It's really clear that these children are being abused throughout the film, from the passive-aggressive gaslighting to the straight-up verbal, mental, physical abuse that is going on. It sets you on the edge of your seat while you're watching the film, and it adds to all of the tense moments. Just can we take a minute to talk about the mind of this film? As I've mentioned, you're made to question the reality that's being presented to you in this film. You go back and forth feeling like they are being legitimate and feeling as if something is seriously wrong, and it fucks with your mind and makes you nervous as you watch, because you cannot discern whether at the end of this film they've actually just been a perfectly normal family throughout, because I think that could have even been more of a wild ending, as if there'd been nothing wrong. Is the plot believable? For once, I'm going to say yes, definitely more believable than the majority of horror films out there. Theoretically, yes, it is something that could happen. You could befriend a strange family on holiday and risk losing your lives and your child due to being overly friendly. It's not that far from reality. And while some of the films border on the extreme, the concept itself is frightening and makes you anxious while you watch it, because you never know who you can trust. You should never really trust a stranger. But when they seem so disarming and funny and nice, you just want to trust that they're legitimately good people, but you never know someone's real intentions. And I think that's part of what makes this film so scary. So let's talk about some pros and cons. Pro-wise, I think the acting and characterization was compelling, made you want to see what was going to happen next. And the tension of the film had me on the edge of my seat throughout. I almost felt like screaming at the screen at certain times. You felt like the characters were almost being stupid and too trusting. But obviously, I guess in their little universe, just trying to figure out if they're actually in danger or not. It was nail-biting and tense, and it kept my attention throughout. And the absolute desperation for them to escape this family is palpable. You can feel it in the air while you watch the film. Talking about the cons of this film, I really didn't enjoy the dinner scene for the reasons I've kind of already said. It didn't feel necessary. I understand it added to the madness of Paddy and Kira and just kind of made you think, what the fuck are they doing? But it was awkward and difficult to watch, and it didn't necessarily add to the plot. I feel like they could have done something different, less sexual, that would have made you also know that they're not right in their head. But then a little part of me thinks that's probably the intention, is to make the viewer uncomfortable. And like I said, some of the decisions of some of these characters were just stupid. Like, this could have all been resolved so much quicker if they'd have just gone, yep, they're weird, let's go. But obviously then it wouldn't have made for such an enjoyable film. Otherwise, really enjoyed it, to be honest with you. Some similar films. The removal of tongs reminds me of Truth or Dare, which came out in 2018. Two very different films. The plots do not align at all, just the removal of tongs. The taking over of lives and the abduction of children remind me of the film Emily, or Amelie, I think it's called, from 2015. The idea of having your kids abducted is probably one of the scariest concepts out there, so I like it when a film really plays on that idea and makes you desperate to see these children make it out alive. The idea of parents abusing their own children, obviously before we knew that they weren't his parents, reminds me of films like Case 39, which came out in 2006, as well as Cobweb from 2023. Let's talk about the ratings. So this was quite a well-received film. Rotten Tomatoes and the audience both gave this an 8.5 out of 10. I can understand why. It was a good film. It was a good film. Although I do want to touch on the fact that it is a remake, and the original film did only come out 2 years ago, which is a bit of a weird concept, and people I've talked to have been put off watching this film because the original is so recent. And I have to admit, I've not seen the original yet, but it is on my list and I will talk about that one as and when I get round to it. Anyway, my rating for this film is a 7 out of 10 because I think there were some things that could have made this film maybe a bit better, but it was by no means a bad film. I still really enjoyed watching it. And that's this film. So if you've seen this or the original, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought about the plot. I think it was a really interesting concept. Yes, so we have seen things like this be done similarly before, but I think this was a nice take, and I think it was a very well-made film. But I'm really interested to know what you thought about it too. If you liked my video, please give it a like, leave me a comment, let me know what you think about the film, or go and watch it if you've not seen it and come back and let me know what you think. Please subscribe for more because I've got so many more films I want to talk about with you, and I'm really enjoying getting to share this space with you. And if you've got any ideas for films you'd like to see me talk about, let me know. I'm really open to the idea of watching some new stuff or talking about films I've already seen. I love talking about horror. But thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Have a great night. Thanks, bye.